Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Nicholas Click, and my coworker and friend Dan Catlin and I are excited to chat with you today about Terraform and the US elections. So we're going to just kind of give a quick overview. We'll talk about how ActBlue impacts elections, talk about some problems we've had, and how Terraform has proved to be a solution for many of those problems. And then we'll go over some examples of where we use Terraform. I do want to talk a little bit about ActBlue. What exactly do we do and how do we impact elections? One of our primary aims is to empower small dollar donors. Whether someone's giving $5, $10, or $25, we want them to be able to be impactful about campaign or cause that they're passionate about. Our platform counters big money and dark money in politics. We're big on cultivating grassroots engagement. We found that when small dollar donors contribute, they're not just donating, they're also becoming voters. They volunteer and they get engaged with campaigns. We've also noticed that our platform is helping to encourage diverse folks to run for office. Essentially, we're lowering the barrier and making it possible for non-traditional candidates to compete. Because it's so easy for them to get set up with fundraising with our online platform. Also, especially this election cycle, we're helping Democrats to be competitive in unlikely locations. For example, Beto O'Rourke in Texas, places like that. So you may not have heard of us. You've probably heard of some of the candidates on our platform. Folks like Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, they all rely on us to scale up their to support their large-scale fundraising efforts. And we're growing fast. This is a graph of our lifetime fundraising. We were founded in 2004, and it took us over 12 years to get to $1 billion. And 18 months later, we hit our second $1 billion. And by the end of the month, so this is where we're at as of an hour ago, by the end of the month, we'll hit $3 billion. So that would have been $1 billion in 10 months. Currently, we have 5.6 million donors, 14,000 campaigns and causes. We process up to 12 contributions a second. And last month, we moved $178 million. All told, this election cycle, meaning from 2016's elections to today, we processed over $1.5 billion. Now, scaling our platform has not been without problems. Essentially, there has been a lack of cohesion of the infrastructure on the strategy end and also on the implementation. As well, staff changes over time have kind of led to exposing a number of issues for us. Essentially, we've dealt with a number of things. We have kind of a divergent sprawling infrastructure. We are based on a number of different providers: Rackspace, AWS, Heroku, Meteor Galaxy. Essentially, whenever a new developer would come on board, they would build their application on their favorite provider. There wasn't a plan. There wasn't a way to glue it all together. We've also been dealing with manual updates that are not in code. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of configuration in code in Chef, but at times we've been surprised by configuration that was just done manually. And a lot of times this has led to major issues for us. As well, we've dealt with black boxes in the code and in our kind of team knowledge sharing. So essentially, we unfortunately sometimes have people that have like siloed information. That information doesn't get spread throughout the team. So generally speaking, it was pretty difficult to work with the systems. As well, in some places, we're using very unintuitive custom scripts and processes. So as part of, in the last 18 months, we've tripled the engineering team from 8 folks to 24. And as well, the kind of issues that we've dealt with are kind of issues of ownership and siloing of information, communication, things like that. So essentially, our team has required more collaboration, more communication, and one thing we've been aiming for is better self-service for our developers.
So we looked to Terraform. Nick and I both have had some experience in the past, and it seemed pretty natural to bring it in to solve the problems we've had so far. So these are sort of the main benefits. So I'll talk about these in a second, but transparency and collaboration, obviously massively improved with Terraform. The modularity has helped us adapt really, really quickly, as well as both of those have sort of created the emergent property of improving our agility and agile processes. Transparency and collaboration. This is sort of our big sort of siloing knowledge sharing problem, moving from legacy systems, very few devs working on it, not necessarily a lot of documentation written, sort of the standard story on apps with a small team, intimately involved with the development of it. They know how it works, they know how to scale it. As those people leave, that knowledge goes away. But we've really been able to do a lot with Terraform here. So obviously getting infrastructure as code obviously lowers the barrier of entry for developers if there's something for them to look at and work with. Obviously configuration drift. We've also been able to, with the tooling, been able to isolate and then open up a lot of our black boxes in a much more safe way while not really affecting our scaling story, uptime. Obviously, reviewing changes. This has been sort of a big one for us. As developers have been coming and going, they were rolling up their favorite platforms. Not all of these platforms have a tool chain. Terraform's provider infrastructure has generally been solving that. Official ones, user ones, they're all helping us. But getting that stuff into a regular development cycle where people can look at GitHub pull requests and review those changes has not only helped us show developers what we're doing, but has helped them understand how to contribute. Obviously, it reduces the time to understand the change if everyone on our team understands Terraform. But really, the big benefit has just been our ability to sort of mesh our dev and ops teams together to sort of address problems or active solutions instead of just sort of siloing off. We're just going to be working on scaling a database problem, and they're going to work on a new feature. It's much easier for us to deliver tools that they can build off of. The modules, I mean, this is really just Terraform modules, but they've given us a lot of very, very specific benefits. We have AWS, we got Fastly, got a few other things we'll talk about in a few minutes here, but the ability to do this stuff and share this stuff across environments has given us much greater sort of an environment promotion model as far as how we can build our dev system to better address the needs of our staging environment for our devs and our production environment, while also actually testing some of this stuff instead of having a sort of very, very isolated production environment that works entirely differently in our staging. So using the code reuse there and just sort of building our version of what needs to get done for a specific service and then varying between those environments has really helped. Obviously, code reuse has helped reduce the time for new versions of services being rolled up. And yeah, I mean, it's just really fast to onboard devs to be like, we've already done this over here. You get to just sort of fork this lightly, change some variables, get a really much more clear, something closer to a service definition than what we could do with just a ton of fractured API wrapper scripts. Now we can obviously, one of the big advantages is a single language for many, many, many providers. And sharing a lot of these configurations between these providers. Obviously, we don't need to necessarily create a service discovery system in certain cases, but it's this simple reduction of time. And sort of doing this stuff with Terraform has just been super helpful. Obviously, drying the code, everyone loves dry code. And similarly, obviously, making slight variations on this has all been helped us very, very quickly expand our Terraform usage and respond to issues in our general scaling. Obviously, a lot of this has just led to much more agile practices across our team. Transparency, modularity, it really has just helped the collaboration, but the scale of our issue, we have a small team, a lot of dollars coming in. We need to respond quickly, and a lot of this has really, really helped us. Furthermore, we really had very, very siloed teams, and by moving into an infrastructure as code system, we were able to really bring the devs into the operations process instead of really treating these as two teams oceans apart. It also allows us to more quickly sort of integrate the knowledge of our dev team and what they're building with the systems we've built out. Obviously, I think HCL is not without its problems. I think it works great, but it's obviously better than us having a large set of custom Ruby scripts for AWS, a different set of sort of curl scripts for running our rack space, using API commands to hit some of our other providers. That common language makes it much quicker for us and our devs to move into into new providers and sort of address new challenges. So we got some examples of what we're doing here.
Yeah. So the first example is our credit card vault. Essentially, we have a custom-built system that tokenizes and stores millions of credit cards. We do this to minimize our PCI scope and also to have a more secure infrastructure where we're dealing with a reference to the number rather than the number itself across our system. So essentially, in early 2017, our credit card vault required a move. Our legacy provider had issues. Those were, for example, the 2FA was broken for a bit. There were network outages, just poor customer service generally. So we were inclined to move to somewhere more stable and secure that we felt good about, that we could scale into, et cetera. So we ended up landing on moving to AWS. Essentially, the architecture, we have VPCs in multiple regions. There's secure peering of the tokens across the regions. We use restricted security groups and NAT gateways. Set up multiple EC2 instances for Node.js applications, Postgres, SSH bastions. And we do the node level configuration is all done with Chef. So essentially, in our Terraform it's essentially a module covering the entire credit card vault peers. So we have multiple peers that can share the tokens back between each other. The module centralizes the code that's used across regions. We obviously store all of our state remotely. We store it in S3. We utilize multiple AWS accounts for our different environments, staging versus production versus testing. This allows us to really segment the different environments and really control it. If I'm in the production directory or I'm in the staging directory, I know I'm only interacting with that AWS account. And some of the benefits that we realized using Terraform, it was really easy to test and tear down as we were kind of trying to figure out what VPC configuration we wanted to use. Obviously, Terraform Plan is really great for just doing a no-op, like dry run to see what it's actually going to do. We've realized the configuration as code prevents those manual changes over time that were leading to surprises for us, and obviously the ease of code review. But in terms, obviously this is a credit card vault, so we're going to be running into some compliance and obvious security-related concerns. What's great about Terraform is that you can really clearly see the network. You can understand the network security, have visibility into it. As part of PCI, you have to do your biannual firewall review. It's really easy to do that. It's right there in the code. The audit as well, it helped with that because as part of the audit, you have to show that you're reviewing the code, and that you can provide examples of that every change has a basically PR review. The PCI controls are in the code, and what's nice is it just, since you're using configuration and code, it just ensures that you're going to maintain that ongoing compliance. And to kind of get specific into the compliance, you can see how Terraform makes it really easy to set up all the all the AWS resources that you need to meet the various requirements. And I've listed some of the requirements there. I'm not going to go into all of it, but definitely helps get you quite a ways down the road towards being PCI compliant. Terraform really made it easy to get quite a ways there.
Yeah, so we're taking in a lot of money right now. The amount of time we are down equates directly to how much funds can go to campaigns. We have ultimately utilized Fastly as our CDN provider and have moved an incredible amount of our processing off to the edge. However, we were in no way managing what the setup was. It was almost entirely manually configured. The GUI works quite well, but as far as change management goes, we almost had no visibility into what developers were doing across our CDN infrastructure, which when we are fundamentally relying on that to make sure that we can collect donations at any given time, this caused some problems. So we've moved the whole thing into Terraform with some great help with some solutions engineers over at Fastly. So we got a bunch out of this. This is probably one of the more successful things we've been doing as far as integrating sort of DevOps ideals into the team. Multi-environment management, configuration, promotion, very similar to what Nick just talked about in our previous example. It allowed us to actually test our CDN configuration for the first time. But this is also probably the biggest example of where we've had real developer benefits. There were a few developers that really needed to make some changes to our CDN configuration. Getting them involved with sort of the Terraform and building our Terraform configuration for our CDN out. We were ultimately able to train them not only on Terraform, but we were also able to show them a very, very major part of our networking infrastructure. This has allowed them to actually go into some of our other Terraform projects, including a lot of our security and permissioning systems, and very, very quickly contribute to that. It's just been really, it's been really great to actually not be working on just sort of like as an isolated operations person from sort of our product cycle. And we've gotten 4 or 5 devs at this point of our relatively small team onboarded and actually treating this as sort of a much more self-service option. So they are able to go into our system, deal with sort of our major CDN configuration, and they know how to actually make changes without us. Sure, they send the stuff for us to review, but it's just been really excellent to make sure that the devs are not sort of just stuck over in their sort of front-end feature development. And the other big thing, obviously, is if we have a single source of truth for what our production configuration is, we can respond to production issues. Things happen. Data centers go down. This is a pretty regular scenario. Things that are out of your control will always happen. But by having our entire configuration there as code, it allows us to very, very quickly not only maybe move traffic between data centers, but address very, very specific issues in not only our routing, but sort of how our cache stability is. Before we would have to essentially debug our entire stack to understand that that an issue was really happening on our CDN layer because we have seeded so much of our application logic to the edge. So where are we going from here? Terraform has been very, very, very successful for us. So over the next year, so as we're preparing for 2020, we're going to be utilizing Terraform to sort of head towards this setup. We're going to be moving all of our hosting off directly to AWS. We're going to continue working with Fastly as our edge provider. We're going to be using Terraform for our entire orchestration layer, as well as some level of configuration, obviously, of providers. And then our host configuration, we are actually outsourcing to Chef, which is now going to not be doing any of our orchestration mechanisms, but we'll just be focused on host configuration, so we don't have custom scripts running, against end providers to just roll up a host. And we're also using Packer right now to sort of build our AMIs out on AWS and get security testing on those. Great tool. We don't have a lot to say besides it's great, you should use it. But it's very, very excellent part, and actually with some of the stuff I was seeing them talk about earlier today, that's going to be even easier for us to integrate our tested AMIs on Amazon into our rollout, into our future AWS stuff. So specifically, Terraform has become very, very important for us. And this is why we're building this stuff on this. Very, very specifically is we can isolate orchestration. Right now, we have our orchestration very, very tightly coupled with our host configuration in Chef. But not using any of the stuff like Chef provisioning, just rake tasks wrapped around Chef. This has caused obvious problems, but by isolating the orchestration, we actually can deal with sort of our cross-provider dependencies much better. This also allows us to focus our Chef on host configuration and more simply dog food that into our Packer, so we can build out good base configuration and review the security of it. We also, obviously, there's been some security issues with elections, and it's become very, very important for us to make sure that we are doing not only regular security reviews, not just for PCI, but something like for the democracy. So making sure that we can really isolate sort of that host level configuration into those tools that are better suited for it. It's just been super helpful, and it's much, much easier for us to review our security posture on individual hosts. Is SSH out of date? Obviously, we also had a bunch of disparate tools. This really meant we had a bunch of disparate configurations at any given time. So with Terraform, we really can build out our service patchwork with all of the dependencies sort of pre-built out, all of the integrations between them built out in sort of a single configuration, instead of us having to, deploy very, very, very strictly think about we need to deploy this app, but first thing we need to go add these routes to Fastly, but we need to turn them off. Then we need to go over to S3 and make sure the IAM permissions are over there. With Terraform, obviously, we can make sure all that stuff is just happening at one time, which is much easier to promote an individual feature or an individual environment change. Obviously, as we are building these examples out and pointing this stuff towards devs, it's easier for us to isolate and manage any future sort of development. We have a lot of projects coming up. No one was ready on our side was ready for the scale of what's been happening over the last 18 months. So we're having to grow really quickly. Terraform's really sped a lot of this up. Obviously, we also weren't automating everything. So this Terraform, storing plans, some of the remote stuff they were talking about earlier, with the remote execution stuff, it gives us a really, really clear path to automate this stuff, so we aren't spending as much time manually remediating what is often actually manual configuration changes in certain parts of our environment. So this actually makes our entire workflow this. We run Terraform, orchestrates providers. Terraform runs Chef on the host that it brings up. Then we're done. We don't actually profit. We're actually a nonprofit. I should have said nonprofit there. We work on tips. I'm not even kidding about that. We work for tips. We are a nonprofit. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so ActBlue's small dollar model has the potential to impact elections. We're actually, if you may have read, there's a lot of articles coming out now about how the Democrats could have possibly amassed a fundraising edge on the Republicans. And what they're finding is a lot of the fundraising is coming from small dollar donors. The vast majority of those small dollar donors are donating on ActBlue. So our platform, again, we kind of already went over all this. We're definitely impacting the election in a number of different ways. And Terraform for us has been a critical part of that impact. It's helped us scale during this period of really massive growth. And like we've been mentioning, it's really enabled a lot of transparency and collaboration between our devs and ops team. It's really aided us with security and PCI compliance and ensuring that we're maintaining those security controls, and as well helping us to reduce downtime during a critical period of fundraising.
Oh yeah, we're hiring for DevOps. So you want to help ActBlue in the next phase for 2020? Hit us up on our site. Also vote. We are collecting lots and lots of money. Sure, that may make an impact. The only real impact is you voting. Please, please vote. Please vote. Thank you. I think that's. Yeah.